Let's start in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen. So this is a, excuse me, this is a church. No kissing in church. I can't. Actually, what was it? Oh, in South America, they had a saying that I thought was hilarious, where they said, "Don't eat in front of the poor." So don't kiss in front of the celibate. Crack myself up. So we're talking about Pope Francis, and last time we went over his life and reforms he's going to make. And so this time I want to kind of start with his theme of mercy, which is his motto, and just begin with his first papal document that he wrote, which is Joy of the Gospel. But I thought this was amazing in the news. Did you see in the news that Pope Francis, he did two things. One, the second in command, who's some German, after he was named Pope, he said, "Protect our children or you're out of a job." And then one of the things that he did was create a new office in the Vatican to investigate any bishops who protect pedophiles, which is pretty stunning. I mean, before that, you just got wordplay from the Vatican of, "Oh, I'm sure you have the spiritual resources to handle this," but I like the little teeth behind it. So that's actually kind of impressive. And he put pressure on and he's had now 5 bishops he's removed so far for various reasons. 1 for financial and 4 for not protecting children. So it's kind of amazing. So before I start, do you guys have anything to say? Okay, well that was short. So I want to continue with this theme of mercy, and one thing that cracked me up is when he made the statement, "I am a sinner," because one conservative magazine got really upset with that and kind of was shocked by it. But he said, and I like this, "I always thought my motto is," and I mentioned this last time, "by having mercy, I become mercy." And really the problem with that's not a good translation. It's actually a line from the homily of St. Bede, where he said, "I really think the real translation of that can't be accurately translated." So he makes up his own word, and the word is mercy. Oh, look at that. No, come on in. Oh, that is cute. Everybody's dressed up for the pictures. Oh, come on in. Come on in. No. Why aren't you going to be in the picture? Are they really? Oh, that's cute. Oh, I just thought you smelled the wine. So he makes up this word mercy that I just think is so incredible. He makes a verb out of mercy, that God is always mercying in and through us. And by participating in God's mercy in and through us to other people, we become more like Christ. And if you remember his vocation story, where he first got the call to the priesthood was when he went to confession. And he said when he used to go to Rome and be called to Rome, he said he always would go to this one church where the famous painting of Caravaggio is in the church. And the painting is of Call of Matthew. And he said, "I always felt like I was Matthew being called, having my sins forgiven." Hey, Mark, there's wine.
After. Save me 2 bucks.
Anyhow, so he put this idea of mercy on his coat of arms, which I just love. And so his first thing he did was, this year, he's calling for, and I love this, a year of mercy. So if he wants anybody who wants to summarize his papacy, he wants it summarized in one word: mercy. And Pope Benedict, God bless him, was called the Pope of Law, and so sometimes people refer to Pope Francis as the Pope of Mercy, because he believes we are called to fulfill God's vision of mercying all day long. And so that just leads to one famous incident when he's on the plane back from South America. They ask him about his stance on homosexuals, and he says, who am I to judge? I just think that sums up a lot, where he says, if they strive after God and good people, who am I to judge? And then he mentioned that the Vatican is controlled by a gay mafia. The man is just obnoxious. But he doesn't mean to be. He's just so candid, it cracks me up. But like Jesus, we're supposed to have compassion on others and show mercy. And so the Pope said, God deals with us with mercy. We should deal with each other with great mercy. And the Pope then notes that if our image of God is that of a stern judge who's always judging us, then we'll act like that. We'll think that our job is to be stern and be condemning with other people's sins. But I just think it's better to say, who am I to judge, and show mercy. And so, like on his first birthday, I just think all these things are so telling of who he is. On his first birthday, usually for the birthday of the Pope, certain dignitaries are brought in for the celebration. He invited the homeless of Rome, and one guy with his dog, and had lunch for the homeless in Rome. Isn't that beautiful? And he's not phony about it. And he is actually quite harsh too. I mean, his criticisms of the mafia in Sicily, no offense to our Italians, he was point blank harsh about that. But he believes in mercy, and he believes in what he calls an open door theology. And he said, and I just think this is very true, where he said, most people live in irregular situations. And the church is there to help them straighten out their life. So he says, I don't want to be a church of small rules and regulations. Quite the opposite, he views the church as a family. And let's face it, in everybody's family, you have somebody who's a little crazy and mixed up. Mine is my mother. But, she's right there. No, over there. Anyhow, what was I going to say? Oh, but I like that idea of, rather than a church of rules, he sees the church as a family. So he says the doors are sacraments of grace, and we're supposed to open up the doors. So he gives an example of a couple coming to get married. And he says, a couple comes and gets married, and I just love his honesty, where he says, most couples are living together before marriage. And I have to tell you, I do a lot of weddings. I'm always shocked and happily surprised when you find a couple that's not living together. That, unfortunately, is the way of the world. I think it's sad for several reasons. Your rate of divorce is double if you live together. And the divorce rate, actually, if you take out second and third marriages, is actually less than 15%. But you could say, well, why do you have such a high rate of divorce if you live together? Is basically they found out that you can't ease into commitment. You can't wade into it. You're either committed or not committed. And if you say, well, let's live together, and then if we get along, we'll get married. What happens is that you still have that backdoor policy in your head after you get married. And let's face it, after the first year of marriage, certain things drop and you find arguments. And that makes it really hard if you already have kind of this escape clause in the marriage. Does that make any sense? So, I by no means think it's great that people live together. I think it's a very poor decision. But that's what we're dealt with. And he says, so get back to the Pope. The Pope says, so this young couple, they're in love, and yes, they're living together, and it's a bad mistake. And they come to the church, and the first thing the priest does is chew them out for living together. You've just driven them out of the church. You haven't straightened out their life. You've really abandoned them. Does that make so deal with it? I love the fact that he deals with a pastoral situation as it is. You have to coax them into a better life. And so the sacraments, he said, are not rewards for good behavior. They're supposed to transform us into the image of Christ. And if all you can do is condemn people, you're stopping the transformation project. You have to lead them. So he said, God is not petty, not waiting to condemn us, but God has an open heart. God is always looking for the opportunity to show mercy. So should the church. So should the priests. So our job is not to condemn people for their mistakes. Our job is to get people through their mistakes. So he says, I prefer a church that is bruised and dirty, from working with the needy, rather than a clean, small church that simply rejects people. Reject everybody who doesn't have their life straightened out. Really, it's just going to be me. I know you're great. So, hey, take her wine away. Okay, vodka. So he said, the love of God is caught up in the experience of mercy. And what is mercy? Mercy is not, avoiding punishment, but he said, mercy is feeling the unbound love of God when you really don't deserve it. The church is supposed to show people that kind of love, not punishment. And so we're supposed to reach out to other people who, yes, have their lives screwed up, and especially for the marginalized, the broken, and the poor. And to love in mercy, we reach out to the rejected, not so that they can prove themselves, so that we can give them an experience of unconditional love. That is God. So he says, I love this line, he said, we should have the fragrance of the gospel around us. He says, you can't have, a lot of Christians have the stench of condemnation. Isn't that just like an interesting contrast? So I love his ideas of mercy. So before I get into joy of the gospel, any objections, statements, opinions? Really, nothing? Okay. What's that?
It sounds good to me.
Yeah. Well, it does to me too. Now, I have to admit, I used to be, this is the odd part, as a newly ordained priest, I kind of feel bad because I was very rule orientated. And this sounds awful. I hope it's not being videotaped. But I followed the rules once when I was a newly ordained priest, my first time as a pastor, and this elderly woman so desperately wanted to become Catholic. She was just dying to become Catholic, and it was a small little parish, and so she mentioned that she had been that her husband has been married before. And I said, well, we have to do the annulment before you become Catholic. And you could just see her drop. She said, my husband will not go through that. My husband was married when he was 18 years old. He was in the army. It lasted 6 months. He doesn't know where this person is. And I stuck to my guns that we needed to do an annulment. And I am truly sorry about that, but do you really think when I die and go to heaven, God's going to say, well, you had to keep with that one. You kept her out of the church. No, but like, that is incredibly, I was brutal. I just don't think God wants that. I know what the rules are, but the woman was dying to become Catholic. And she would have been a great one. She was very soft and gentle and loving. And just think, because she was elderly, she died without becoming Catholic because I wanted to make sure I kept the rules. And so I have to tell you, like, privately, and this drives some of my staff up the wall, I'll use whatever door I can to get people. If they're truly sincere about getting Catholic, I'll get them in any way they want. You know, they can't make the classes, because there are some people who can't make the classes. I don't care. You know, we'll bubble gum and stick and do something. Well, we'll do something, but you will become Catholic. Does that make sense? So I break a lot of rules, and I know this for a fact. There's a couple people in the church, in the RCA program, 2 people, who really get upset with me, we'll say, bending the rules. Does that make sense? But there is also this canon law that says when there's a penalty to be imposed upon people, you make the circle as small as possible. When there's any type of benefits to give people, you make the circle as wide as possible. You know, it's not like English common law, which is very strict. Either you're going 55 or you're not. It's Italian law. So canon law says that. And the last canon law says you do what you have to get people in the kingdom of God. I actually think that's mercy. So I love the fact that he wants to declare a year of mercy. So, oh yeah.
I got a question. I have seen, not here, but in other parishes, where if a person, say was divorced, didn't get an annulment, they weren't allowed to receive the sacraments.
Yes, actually just right up the road in Emmett, the priest gave a homily a couple months ago where he said, if you're divorced, it is a mortal sin for you to go to communion. And so 2 women started coming here. It's not divorce that's the problem. In fact, canon law says you may be morally obligated to get divorced if there's physical abuse towards you or the children. It's not divorce. And even if it is, so when I was in the seminary, there was, our canon lawyer got all these awards for being one of the best canon lawyers in the nation. But he was very odd, because he was a canon lawyer, but he loved parish work, so he also worked at a parish. And he was really more of a sacramental minister, but he kind of had this parish, he loved it, and it was after First Communion, where in the reception he's talking to this woman, and it occurs to her, she has 6 children, but she's always at church. But she raised them all, but it just occurred to him that I've never seen you go to communion. So he asked her about it. She said, oh, I can't. She says, I'm divorced and remarried. And he said, oh, no problem. I can help you with an annulment. And she says, no, you can't. Her story was she was a teenager in Baton Rouge, and in high school she went on a date and was date raped and then turned pregnant, and the families pressured both of them to get married. Of course, you know, that one didn't work out. She gets divorced and later moves to Chicago and falls in love with this other Catholic man. So she applies for an annulment. But for you to get an annulment, you need 3 witnesses who knew you at the time of the marriage. Well, none of the family would corroborate about the rape. So she couldn't get the witnesses. She knew people in Chicago, but it would have to be her family from Baton Rouge. They wouldn't testify to it. So the priest says, you're right, you could never get an annulment. He says, but, and this is going to shock you, there's more valid marriages in the eyes of God than there are in the eyes of the church. And that probably shocks you, but you have to think, step back and think in the theology of marriage. Remember, we always considered marriage a sacrament. We didn't always have a ritual for it. The ritual came later. All you'd need for 2 people to get married is for you to make your vows to each other. It could be in a field. Nobody could have heard it but you guys. Eventually, we came up with a ritual and then the law that no, you have to have it in front of an altar with at least 2 witnesses, because we have the right to know who's married to who, because there's just kind of this abuse system going on. So if you're serious about it, have it be, if you're serious that you want your marriage in the eyes of God, have it done in the eyes of the church. But think about that. For hundreds of years, you had people who simply did it in a field. Does that make sense? So anyhow, so he said, there is another way. You're right, that you could never get an annulment, but there is what's called internal forum. That if you believe that you are not in an adulterous relationship, that you really have made your commitment to this person, and you can't get an annulment, but you truly do believe the last judgment, you know God looks at this as a marriage, that you have made your commitments, then you can go to communion, and not the Pope or Bishop or even Father Len could stop you. That's internal forum. So, like, because I get that every once a year, where somebody is upset because they notice B is going to communion and she's divorced. And B doesn't have an annulment. How do you know B's not claiming internal forum? And there's no paperwork, it's just between her and God.
How would you look up the information to give that to somebody?
Look up the canon on internal forum,
Okay.
which I couldn't tell you what it is. Anyhow, yes, yeah,
Just
Katie.
because you're divorced doesn't mean you can't go to communion if you.
Yes, that's true.
It's remarried, yeah.
Yeah, but some priests, as what he said, are very harsh. I'm sorry, as in Pope Francis' words, the Church of Little Rules, not the Church of Mercy.
Ken, we have
I have to admit, I was very harsh at one time too.
we have very good friends that were both married before and remarried many years ago, and their priest let them, I don't know what all went on, but let them both receive communion without an annulment.
Maybe they claim internal forum. Maybe they couldn't get an annulment. Maybe they're going to burn in hell. Joking. But I mean, really, we're not supposed to be the Church of Little Rules. We're supposed to be the ones that are mercy all day long. I'm not advocating people living together or screwed up lives, but people come with very messed up lives, and we're to show them mercy and help them straighten out. That's my bottom line. One way or another, if you want to become Catholic, I'll help you. So anyhow, his first papal document that I just think says a lot about him is Joy of the Gospel. That's the title of it, which just also kind of speaks about his personality. And the great thing about this gospel this encyclical, this letter, is it shows that in his eyes, the church is in desperate need of renewal. And it is. I had two people from our parish went to Ireland, just got back a couple days ago, Pat and Sue, and they said they were shocked because they went to Mass when they were there and the churches were empty. She said, well, they couldn't believe it. Where were all the people? Well, a couple decades ago, I went to Ireland and the churches were packed and the pedophilia scandal lost a lot. I know this crazy woman who was telling me about this priest who spent a year as a priest working in Ireland after he was retired, and he said the children didn't know, didn't know how to pray the rosary, or didn't have any?
Didn't have a rosary.
They didn't even have a rosary. This is Ireland. It's not some third world country. The church is in desperate need. So anyhow, their parish, they made them rosaries and sent them to Ireland. You gotta be kidding, this is Ireland. It's absolutely shocking. So the Pope is right. The church is in need of renewal, but I love his renewal, what it looks like. Now what's interesting is that the Vatican wrote a draft document for him. Like usually popes really don't write their own documents. Usually they have an underwriter. Does that make sense? So the Vatican wrote the document for him and he threw it away. And wrote his own. And his is very radical. And the other thing is that usually papal documents are very stodgy, boring, and extremely abstract. But his uses language that you can understand, where he says, we Christians, we Catholics, shouldn't have funeral faces. That the church shoes must be muddy from working with others, that the confessional should not be a torture chamber, that the Eucharist is not a reward for the perfect, but for medicine for the needy. The document speaks about the art of joy, that people relate to enthusiasm more than they do to theological condemnations. And like the new evangelism is really not so new. Its roots go clear back to actually about 1978. It's not that new. What's new about it is how he's doing it. Where he asks the question, did we lose the joy of the gospel? Has the church lost the evangelical spirit? Or we just worry about, the small correct that have their life together? Or are we going out trying to get everybody excited about trying to be Catholic and this love of being a happy Catholic? Or have we become apathetic and indifferent? And Francis believes that the church has to go out and welcome others. That's the art of joy, where he says, and I love this phrase, he wants to start a revolution of tenderness. Isn't that a great line? And you know that part in the book of Revelation where Christ says, I'm knocking on the door of your heart if you open. I always interpreted it that Christ is on the outside knocking on the door, right? Francis flips it around. That Christ is knocking on the door, asking us to open up the doors of our hearts, asking us to open up the doors to the church and go out and get everybody and bring them in. Bring them into our hearts, bring them into the church. Isn't that a great twist of that? Maybe it's Christ knocking, is inside the church knocking to get out. This is a huge change because like Pope Benedict also was very concerned about the new evangelism. But his encyclicals always seem to attack the modern world. It blames the modern world for leaving the church, and it blames them for relativism, which, to be honest, I believe one of the problems of the modern world is relativism. But you can't blame people for leaving the church. You have to offer a reason for them to come back, not condemnation. So like when Pope Benedict said he wanted a smaller, more obedient Catholic Church, that's kind of funny coming from a German. A smaller, more obedient church. Didn't Christ say the exact opposite? Where he said, go out to all the world, compel them to come in. And Francis, I love this. He wants us to compel others to come in by evoking the joy of the gospel. And this is also what St. Francis did. Remember, St. Francis' great line is, always preach the gospel, use words if necessary. So Pope Francis says, Christ did not come to condemn the world. His first homily was about liberation and joy. So what I like about the encyclical is it doesn't use condemnation to try and blame people. He does mention what the problems of the world are, and I like that. But you can't blame them. And so he communicates through joy. And the other thing, he also, in the language of it is very interesting because it's language that is really easy to read. And if you look at like Pope Benedict's encyclical, they're just so abstract. And one very famous theologian, who has a doctorate said, I'd have to reread, try and figure out what he's saying. It's very abstract. Pope Francis, in defense, people say about Benedict, well, he was a professor for many years. Well, so was Pope Francis. But Pope Francis taught chemistry and literature, which just reminds me, his is designed to easily communicate. Francis himself was a professor for many years, more than I think Benedict. Benedict mostly spent most of his life in the Vatican. So it reminds me of Balthasar's criticism, where he said, von Balthasar was John Paul II's favorite theologian. He really is great. But von Balthasar said, instead of studying philosophy, you should have studied literature. learn how to communicate with other people. But if you keep everything abstract and difficult, nobody understands it. The Pope's language in the document, it's really easy. It's about this intimate encounter with Christ. And it's more about a relationship than a philosophical textbook. And so it's filled with kind of these homey and pithy sayings about, don't have a funeral face, or don't turn the confessional into a torture chamber. Things like that. I just love his comments because they always kind of have a shock value where it says, stop giving boring homilies. I just love the Pope who can say that. Or it said, stop being peacock priests who love prancing around in lace and fineries. Or, we shouldn't be a people of Lent without ever any Easter. That's a great line. It's just one continuous Lent. We should be a church of the poor for the poor. And he says we should allow ourselves to be evangelized by the poor, to listen to them, to be their friends, and to speak for them. So I kind of like his whole challenge. And better yet, his words meet his actions, where he really does believe in serving a hurting poor. Some people think his language is over the top. I think it's very pointed, and you can easily get it. His actions, some people are very furious with. Do you remember his first Holy Thursday when he went out to prison and washed women's feet? And I had 2 parishioners who were blistering mad about that. I know, they were so mad, and I can't get what they're mad about. I really don't understand it, because usually, the Pope would wash the feet of cardinals. I don't think that's what Jesus would have done. I don't think it's about washing the very clean feet of the elite. I think it's about reaching out to the hurting and broken. So the Pope makes this great difference in this document between the difference between evangelizing and proselytizing, the difference between proposing faith and trying to impose faith on other people. So one of the things he says is that we've got to return to the core of Catholicism. He says we have to concentrate on the essentials, on what's beautiful, most grand, most appealing, and at the same time, most necessary. So what the Pope is calling for really technically is called the hierarchy of truths. Now, I know I've mentioned that before. Does everybody know what I mean by anybody not know what the hierarchy? Okay, so as Catholics and Jews, Jews have a different one, but we got it from Judaism. Jews and Catholics believe in the hierarchy of truth. So if we're Jews, if you quote the writings and I can quote Moses, I win. Does that make sense? We do the same thing. You might be able to quote the letters of St. Paul, but if I can quote Jesus, I win. Does that make sense? Some truths are more true. That's a hierarchy of truth. And in Catholicism, it works like this. The highest is dogmas. Everything Christ revealed to the apostles. There'll be no more new dogmas. Nothing will, and everything that's a dogma is from God. It may not be articulated well, but it's from God. And for you to say that you're a Catholic in good standing, you have to believe in dogma. You have to have that on your plate. The next thing is doctrines. Doctrines are things that we believed for 2,000 years, but technically God never said you had to believe this stuff. That's like how many books are in the Bible? Jesus never said that. Does that make sense? There's a lot. Those are doctrines. Like if you want to say, well, I don't believe the letter of James should be in the Bible, that doesn't make you a heretic. You're wrong, but it doesn't make you a heretic. The largest, below doctrine is teachings. Teachings are opinions of popes and bishops. And yes, that changes all the time. We would say you're obligated to listen to it, not necessarily believe it, because not all teachings have been true. The Pope, during the time of the Civil War in the United States, called on the United States to give up this strange experiment in democracy. We didn't listen to that one. Does that make sense? You can listen to it, but you're not necessarily obligated to obey it. And there's a huge, just on like the question of evolution, John Paul II believed in evolution. Benedict doesn't seem to believe in evolution. Francis does believe in evolution. So Catholic teaching changes. Does that make sense? And the very bottom is disciplines. And we'd say God doesn't even care about disciplines. We do it for good order. A lot of liturgical rules are disciplines. Actually, technically, well, it doesn't matter. Like what color vestment? So one Sunday, I put on a green vestment when I should have put on a white vestment. You know, and during Mass, I realized, I put on the wrong vestment. You know, I'm not the one who, I don't think priests should put on whatever vestment they feel like of the day. Like little things like that actually drive me up a wall. Because like, there's one good-hearted priest who, on Christmas, wears a red and green vestment. Green vestment, that's not the colors. You know, do I think he's going to burn in hell? No. Do I think it's right? No. Do I think God cares? Not really. I think you should have, like, for good order, we have disciplines.
Now, when you mentioned the rules around getting annulments, does that fall under disciplines?
That'd be more teachings.
Somewhere in between.
Yeah, that'd be higher. Okay, so anyhow, so he says we should return to the core, get back to what's most important. Said that he wants us to preach the heart of the gospel rather than some politicized theological position. And sometimes he says we talk more about law than grace. We talk more about church hierarchy than Christ. We talk more about the Pope than God. You know, I love the idea, let's just get back to essentials. And he's right, sometimes you hear more about the hierarchy than you actually do about God. I love what he says about happiness too, where he says, I just think this is great. He says, sometimes we act as if you could only be happy if 1,000 conditions are met. You know, that's actually kind of true. The modern idea that you're only happy with the swiftness of which your needs are met. But what we need is patience. And we need patience to find out what truly makes us happy. But he's right, you know, I can only be happy if 1,000 little conditions are met and met swiftly. And I think with our technology, it's even more so. Like I get irritated if I have to wait 3 seconds for my phone to upload. Anyhow, if that's your definition of happiness, you'll always teeter-totter between happiness and unhappiness. Happiness, he says, is conditional. Joy comes from a relationship. It's in our spirit. It's our relationship with God, and nothing can take that away. Slow internet service or not, we have joy because that comes with a relationship. Happiness is conditional. Joy comes with detachment. Happiness depends upon it. So I love what he says there, and he also has some criticisms why there's been this cooling of evangelization. And he gives some warnings about relativism, skepticism, individualism, and this is very consumer mentality. That actually is hard to do church when people have a consumer mentality. But if the cause of our joy is Christ, then we can bring it to other people. Evangelism is not about the joy of having the right answers. If that's what it is, it's really about shopping around for what attracts people. And if it's just about having the right, I was looking at the kids like, wow, that was a quick photo session. But I do think it's sweet that the grandmother, the Muba, won it with her grandchildren. So, but otherwise, he said, if it's about us, we get wrapped up in our own desires. And what's really interesting, his harshest criticism is against who? The clergy. You know, why have so many people left the church? he blames the he doesn't just blame them for relativism or the world for consumerism, but also the clergy for largely inadequate preaching. And he says pastoral ministry in a missionary style is obsessed with the disjointed transition of a multiple of doctrines to be insisted and imposed upon. He said that can distract us from the gospel's primary invitation and to respond to the love of God who saves us. And this Pope speaks of the many who feel superior to others because they remain intransigently faithful to a particular Catholic style from the past, whereby instead of evangelizing, one analyzes and classifies other people. And those who have an ostentatious preoccupation with liturgy and for the church's prestige, but without any concern for the gospel that has any real impact on the needs of the people. This is a tremendous corruption disguised as a good. I love this line. God save us from a worldly church with superficial, spiritual, and pastoral trappings. Isn't that really just kind of amazing? And next time I'm going to talk about, well, I guess next Tuesday I don't have it, but the next time I'm here I'm going to talk what he says about vocations, and I'm going to work my way to the wine. But I do think he's right. I think it's we clergy who have to not quit blaming the world for leaving the church and look at what we've done. So before we move on to the next section, does anybody have any comments, opinions? Yeah.
I was watching for Zakaria.
Oh yeah, I don't get to watch much TV, but go ahead. Yeah.
And they had a politician on, and the Pope was supposed to make an announcement on Monday about taking care of the earth.
Oh yeah.
Climate, right.
Yeah, that's going to be my last one because I don't have it yet. But
Thursday.
yeah, actually, to be honest, it's already been leaked. So somebody from the Vatican already leaked it.
So where do we find it?
Shocking.
Just Google it. I don't know. I'm not there yet.
But the point is that the politician, who's running for president, said, he said, leave science to the scientists, because he knew the Pope was going to be announcing this.
And he could say, I am.
So yeah, that's what.
I have a degree in chemistry.
So I just thought that was kind of humorous.
It is kind of humorous. Also, if you don't know, the Koch brothers have also funded a response to this letter already. So they already have I just think it's kind of funny. But we'll talk about that at the very last session because it gives us time to look at it. But yeah, and so, yeah, anyhow, he has his critics too.
I'm just curious where the fathers and our leaders of the church get this information from the Pope. Are they required to listen to something, to read something? How do they?
Oh, encyclicals? The bishops are supposed to read it, yeah.
The bishops are, and then they pass it down to.
But to be honest, I would really I hate to be cruel, but this is my opinion. Do you know how thick the rite of reconciliation is? If you actually looked at the rite of reconciliation, do you know it's about this thick? You could read it in cover to cover in 10 to 15 minutes. Most priests have never read it. And I'll quiz them. Like I'll say, do you know it mentions 4 ways to go to confession? And they'll say, 4? And even a certain bishop who's in retirement, I was curious if he knew that. And I said, did you know it mentions 4 ways to go to confession? He says, well, I only thought there's 1. Like, how could you think that? If they haven't even read the ritual, I think a lot of times the Vatican, especially if it's very erudite and abstract, I think bishops say, well, I'll get to that after, Mayberry. I just don't think it ever gets read. I'm just being crassly honest. Because I kind of test priests to see if they've read any of this stuff, and I don't think many of them do. I just think you're kind of busy, and it's kind of like, what, you know what I mean?
But isn't kind of an obligation for them to know this information?
It's not enough, well, it's for the bishops, it should be an obligation.
Yeah, I think kind of interesting.
Hold on one sec, I just thought of something. How many people here read Joy of the Gospel? See, and how many people here, if we didn't have this adult ed class, would know what's in Joy of the Gospel? So, I mean, you know.
Well, I read an article in a magazine, which is a Jesuit magazine, of course, it's called The Transition from the Cute Pope. When Francis was first pope, he was known as the cute pope because of all the cute things he did and said. And the fact that his message is pretty, not all that wonderful, as far as a lot of people would be concerned. And then I read another one about the Beatitudes, blessed are the poor. And they kept attaching to it the poor in spirit. And what they were saying is what it really means is the poor in spirit is the part of it. In other words, the people who, in other words, has nothing, it has something to do with, but really, he's really aiming at, and we have for a long time, that the poor in spirit is, I'm not saying this right. He's addressing poverty as poverty, He's just not saying the poor in spirit, he's saying the poor.
So actually, I think he's saying both, but that's my opinion. Because he's very pro-poor,
Right.
but he's also, like, that one statement he made about God save us from, I think he sometimes makes these statements about the poor in spirit, and it's after some clergy that are more concerned about lace and that stuff.
And what this offered was talking about is his visit to the United States when he addresses our Congress, when most of the people are part of the 1%, and saying, the people that are.
I totally agree. Everybody loves Pope Francis, but I guarantee you, I think when he comes and he addresses Congress, they better hang on to their seats because, I mean, he's not mean, but he'll throw it out. And I think a lot of clergy won't like him because he says things like stop giving boring homilies, stop being peacock priests, get out there and help. Like I think we're in for a. I'm actually going to enjoy it. So.
Are you going when?
No, that's too many people. I don't like people. No, like in all honesty, I do love people, but I am nobody believes me. But when I took the MMPI, I am off the scale. Like I remember the person saying, "Wow, you're really an introvert." Yes, I really am. People drain me. I love people, but they're very draining. Like I'd much rather sit at home alone.
Hope is expensive too. You could rent your house out for $2,000 a day if near Philadelphia.
It will be maddening crowds, which I think people should go. I really do, but I'm not one who would want to go. I'll listen.
Don't you think that people also have to take some blame for, how he says it's the clergy, but people go away from the church.
Oh, no, I think he puts that on both sides.
Does he?
But his harsh criticism is to the clergy. Because, I hate to say it, I think they need it. I mean, come on, do the work you're supposed to do.
Yeah, I agree, but I think that we also have to take some responsibility.
Oh, I totally agree with that too. But I love the fact that for the first time he blames the clergy rather than saying it's the world's fault. And yet motivating that he wants everybody to become Catholic. And this is the other part I really like is paragraph 28 when he mentions the parish. Like, I'm not used to popes mentioning the parish. Like, Does that make any sense? Like, he mentions the parish, that the parish should be the place of evangelization, where we proclaim the love of God. And he says it's the parish where the church is living in the world. I love that. The church living in the world is not the Curia. It's not the Vatican. The front line is the parish. So I like how he speaks about a whole parish being the place of evangelization. Not, missionaries off in third world countries. It's the local parish. And I love how he says that we have to be intentional. He doesn't give any cookie cutter answers of this is what, program 1, 2, 3, step 1, 2, 3. And I believe that. I believe no matter if you're in, because I don't think cookie cutter things work. What works in Idaho would not work in South America or the Philippines. But he says, if intention is basically this, and I think this is very true. Whatever you really desire, you will find a way of getting it. Be it evil or good, whatever you want, we human beings are very clever about getting what we want. And if one of the things our parish wants is evangelization, if we want to bring joy of the gospel, and like one of our parishioners, I love this, he's actually, I shouldn't mention this, but him and his wife are really great people. But I'm a little crass. You probably never noticed. No, don't argue. But I was walking in a parking lot, and I'm walking and I'm looking at cars and other bumper stickers, and one bumper sticker says, "Jesus loves you, and so do I." And of course I thought, oh God, really? And then I look, and it's Vietnam vet. Then I look and thought, oh my God, that is a parishioner of mine. And then I realized whose car it was. And then I thought, yeah, him and his wife, they really do love everybody. What? I think that's so funny. And I think it was somebody in the gym who asked him why he's so happy. And you know what he said? He says, "I'm a happy Catholic." Isn't that a great line?
Yes.
Like that evangelize. If your intention is that you want to spread this joy everywhere, you will find a way of doing it. And so the Pope doesn't give any cookie cutter A, B, C, D. It's just intention. So he's for evangelizing, he's for joy over proselytizing. Rather than define who's a heretic or arguing apologetics, we need to invite people into the church. And I just want to mention, when I say apologetics, that was popular a couple of years ago. Like, it drove me up the wall. People calling themselves apologetics. I believe in apologetics. Apologetics is explaining why we do what we do, why we believe what we believe. That's great if you could do that. But in the modern world, what it turned out to be a couple of years ago is not apologetics. It was proselytizing. And it was apologetics in the modern world, what it had come to mean a couple of years ago is, well, if you're a Mormon, I'm going to give you these stock answers. This is what's wrong with Mormonism. A, B, C, D, and they all might be right. Does that make sense? But do you think you've really won anybody? Do you think you've won the Mormon over? Or Presbyterianism? This is what's wrong with Presbyterian. It might be right, but all you've done is attack somebody. You haven't converted them. Does that make sense? So, like a couple weeks ago, somebody came into the sacristy after Mass and they said, I was just wondering, are you a priest who, how do you phrase it? Are you a priest who promote my apologetics? And I said, oh, stop that. Because I know what it is. You know, it's this track program of this is what's wrong with you. I just don't think that makes us the place of love. Even if you're right, I don't think it does any good. Does that make any sense? To me, that kind of apologetics is a lot like Mormonism. You know, where Mormonism, you take these 18-year-old boys and you go give them a program that one, you ask people this question, and then you follow it up with this question, and then you say this, and it's just training on track 1, 2, 3, 4. Does that make sense? Now, with 18-year-old missionaries, it is so easy to throw them off because you just have to not answer the question they're asking and ask them a sincere question. And they're not trained to answer with sincerity. Does that make sense? They have a formula, and you have to stick with the formula. And the problem I have with the new evangelization of the past is that it was very formulaic. It was, this is what you've got to believe, this is why. Not that any of it's wrong, but nobody's converted by attacking them. Does that make sense? I just find that very upsetting. And so in the document, Pope Francis mentions listening, that evangelization starts with listening to other people, not telling them what to do, but listening to them. That you can only awaken this yearning for Christ, he says, with compassionate listening. Some people say, well, I'm not an evangelist. I don't know what to tell people. Don't start with trying to figure out what to tell people. Try and figure out where people are right now. And so he says, listen to them. And he uses the example of the road to Emmaus, which really caught my attention. He said, look at Christ. Christ, when the two apostles are running away from Jerusalem, so there are people who are running away from the church. And like Christ, we have to go after them. And Christ, do you know the road to Emmaus story? He comes up to him, and he doesn't start by lecturing him. He starts by listening to him, saying, I forget the question now, but basically, what were you talking about? And they say, and I love the arrogance, are you the only person in Jerusalem who doesn't know what happened? He knows! But he's building a relationship with them. Does that make sense? And then he leads them back. And it's not manipulation, it's sincerity. You don't approach people telling them what they need to do. He believes in the theology of the road to Emmaus. You start by creating a relationship. And in the relationship, then you could lead them to the breaking of bread and back to the church. So he says it starts by listening, not by telling people what they have to do. And like just here at Holy Apostles, it was an evening class. Do you remember? I don't think it's you, because my eyes aren't that good. So my eyes are bad. It might be you. But do you remember the young man who, I know he used to come a lot, he came through RCA and then was involved with everything. He usually sits over here, where he said, my wife was Catholic and we decided to look for a church and we came to Mass. Do you guys remember that story? Just hope. Anybody else? Go. He said, we came to Mass and we couldn't figure out what to do. Couldn't figure out when to stand or kneel, or we were totally confused and getting irritated. And finally this elderly woman behind him put her shoulder on his wife and says, let me help you. And they felt welcome. Suddenly this resentment filled with, we're coming back next week. Really, it's relationship that brings people in. So he says we should begin with reaching out and understanding where people are. And now, if you want to understand where people are, you have to be able to wade through the fact that many people have a little messed up lives. But you have to listen and figure out where they're coming from. But if you start with condemning them, why would anybody join a church like that? So he actually, and I thought this is why we started with Hail Mary, because under listening, he says the patron for evangelization in his mind is Mary. Mary who asks questions. Zechariah starts telling Gabriel how God has to work. Mary, remember the story? And he said, but Mary starts with a relationship. So Mary is about listening. So if we want to evangelize, we take Mary as our role and start by listening, not condemning. Which I just thought was beautiful.